The crash. The night sky of the Mojave Desert blazed with an otherworldly light. What started as a pinprick of brilliance quickly grew into a fiery streak, plummeting towards the earth at breakneck speed. Park Ranger Sarah Chen, on a routine patrol, witnessed the spectacle with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Control, this is Ranger Chen," she radioed, her voice tight with tension. "I've got a situation here. Possible meteor strike about 5 miles east of my position, requesting backup and emergency services." As Sarah sped towards the impact site, her mind raced with possibilities. A meteor strike was rare enough, but something about this felt different. The object had seemed to change course slightly just before impact, almost as if. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was probably just her imagination playing tricks on her. The acrid smell of smoke and burning sage reached her nostrils as she approached the crash site. A deep furrow had been carved into the desert floor, ending at a smoldering crater. And there, half buried in the sand and rock, lay something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was unmistakably a spacecraft. The vessel was sleek and elongated, its hull a dull silver that seemed to absorb the light from Sarah's flashlight. There were no visible windows or hatches, just smooth, unbroken curves that hinted at technology far beyond anything she'd ever seen. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her radio again. "Control, we're going to need a lot more than just emergency services. Get me the FBI, Homeland Security, and anyone else you can think of. This is big." As she waited for backup to arrive, Sarah circled the craft cautiously. Despite the violence of its landing, the ship appeared largely intact. There were no signs of fire or major structural damage, just a fine layer of desert dust coating its surface. A faint hum emanated from the craft, barely audible over the whisper of the wind. Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Whatever this thing was, it was still active. The sound of approaching vehicles snapped Sarah out of her reverie. Within minutes, the crash site was swarming with personnel from various agencies. Men and women in hazmat suits carefully approached the craft, scanning for radiation and other potential hazards. FBI Special Agent Marcus Holt strode up to Sarah, his face a mask of professional calm. "Ranger Chen, I'm Agent Holt. Walk me through what you saw." As Sarah recounted her experience, she couldn't help but notice the tension in Holt's jaw, the way his eyes kept darting back to the spacecraft. He was trying to hide it, but he was just as unsettled as she was. "Thank you, Ranger," Holt said when she finished. "We'll take it from here. I'm going to have to ask you to maintain strict confidentiality about what you've seen tonight." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As she turned to leave, a commotion near the craft caught her attention. The team in hazmat suits had gathered around one side of the ship, their voices raised in excitement or alarm. It was hard to tell which. "Sir," one of them called out, "we found what looks like a hatch, and I think it's opening." Sarah and Agent Holt exchanged a look of disbelief before rushing towards the craft. The hum from earlier had grown louder, and now a seam had appeared in the previously smooth hull. As they watched, the scene widened, revealing a dark interior. Hearts pounding, the assembled group waited for a first glimpse of an alien life form. Would it be humanoid, insectoid, something beyond their wildest imagination? A figure emerged from the shadows of the craft's interior. It was bipedal, clad in what appeared to be a form-fitting suit of unfamiliar design. As it stepped into the light, gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. The being removed its helmet, revealing a face that was unmistakably, impossibly, human. "Please," the figure said in perfect, unaccented English, "we need your help." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. More figures emerged from the craft, 6 in total, all appearing human. They were immediately whisked away to a hastily established quarantine zone, leaving the gathered officials struggling to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Sarah found herself pulled into a debriefing with Agent Holt and several high-ranking military officers who had arrived on the scene. The atmosphere in the makeshift command center was thick with tension and disbelief. "Let me get this straight," General Lancaster, a gruff, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, said. A spacecraft of clearly alien origin crashes in the middle of the Movav, but instead of little green men, out pop a bunch of people who look just like us and speak English. Does anyone else find this just a little hard to swallow? Agent Holt cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I understand your skepticism, but I can assure you, what Ranger Chen and I witnessed was very real. The question now is, who are these people, and where did they come from?" A scientist from NASA, Dr. Elias Corey, spoke up. "The technology of that craft is like nothing we've ever seen. It's centuries, maybe even millennia beyond our current capabilities. If these are humans, they're certainly not from our time." The implications of Dr. Curry's words hung heavy in the air. Time travel. It seemed impossible, and yet. "What about the quarantine team?" Sarah asked, breaking the tense silence. "Have they learned anything from the passengers?" Agent Holt nodded, pulling out a tablet. "Preliminary reports are coming in now. The passengers appear to be in good health, showing no signs of exotic pathogens or radiation exposure. They're cooperating fully with our teams, but..." He trailed off, his brow furrowed as he read the latest update. "But what?" General Lancaster demanded. "But they're claiming to be from Earth. Not just from Earth, but from our near future. Approximately 200 years from now." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each official trying to make sense of this earth-shattering revelation. Sarah felt her head spin. If these people were telling the truth, the implications were staggering. As the arguments raged around her, Sarah's attention was drawn to a video feed from the quarantine area. One of the passengers, a young woman with striking green eyes, was speaking to a doctor. There was something in her expression, a mix of wonder, sadness, and determination, that resonated with Sarah. "I know this must be hard to believe," the woman was saying, her voice clear through the speakers. "But we're not your enemies. We're your descendants, and we've come back because we need your help. The future of humanity depends on it." The doctor pressed for more information, but the woman shook her head. "I can't say more right now. It's too dangerous. But please, you have to trust us. Everything depends on it." As Sarah watched, she felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever had brought these people back in time, whatever threat they were running from, it had to be dire indeed. The meeting continued late into the night, with plans being made for further investigation and containment. It was decided that the existence of the craft and its passengers would be kept secret from the public for now, at least until they had more information. As dawn broke over the desert, Sarah found herself standing alone near the crash site. The spacecraft had been covered with a large tarp, but its outline was still visible, a stark reminder of how the world had changed in just a few short hours. Agent Holt approached, looking haggard after the long night. "Penny for your thoughts, Ranger Chen." Sarah shook her head, still struggling to process everything. "I just keep thinking, if they really are from our future, why do they come back? What could be so terrible that they'd risk changing history itself?" Holt's expression darkened. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we're going to find out whether we want to or not." As if in response to his words, alarms suddenly blared from the direction of the quarantine zone. Sarah and Holt exchanged a brief, alarmed look before sprinting towards the commotion. They arrived to find the area in chaos. Two of the time travelers had somehow escaped their containment and were making a break for the perimeter. As Sarah watched in astonishment, one of them, a tall, athletic man, easily vaulted over a security fence that should have been impossible to scale. "Stop," Holt shouted, drawing his weapon. But the escapees were moving with inhuman speed and agility, dodging guards and leaping obstacles as if they were standing still. Just as it seemed they might get away, the young woman with green eyes, the one Sarah had seen on the video feed, stepped into their path. She spoke to them urgently in a language Sarah didn't recognize, her hands held out in a placating gesture. For a tense moment, it seemed the escapees might push past her. But then, slowly, they relaxed their stance. The woman turned to the pursuing security forces, her voice carrying clearly across the compound. "I apologize for my companion's actions," she said. "They're afraid, and with good reason. But I give you my word, we will cooperate fully. We have to, for all our sakes." As the escaped time travelers were led back to containment, Sarah caught the eye of the green-eyed woman. There was a weight in her gaze, a sense of barely contained urgency that made Sarah's pulse quicken. Whatever secrets these visitors from the future held, one thing was becoming increasingly clear: the fate of two worlds, the present and the future, now hung in the balance. And somehow, Sarah knew she was going to be caught right in the middle of it all. First contact. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. News of the crash and its extraordinary passengers had spread through the highest levels of government, sparking intense debate and speculation. World leaders were briefed in emergency sessions, intelligence agencies scrambled to gather information, and scientists from various disciplines were brought in to study both the visitors and their remarkable craft. Dr. Amelia Cortez, a renowned xenobiologist, found herself in the unique position of studying humans who were, paradoxically, alien. She stood outside the quarantine zone, watching the time travelers through a two-way mirror. They looked so normal, and yet... "Fascinating, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. Amelia turned to see Sarah Chen, the park ranger who had first discovered the crash. She had been kept on as a liaison, given her unique perspective on the events. Amelia nodded. "It's like looking at a living puzzle. They're human, but not quite. Their cellular structure, their DNA, it's us, but with subtle differences. Improvements, you might say." Sarah's brow furrowed. Improvements. Enhanced cellular regeneration, optimized neural pathways, strengthened immune systems, Amelia explained. "It's as if someone took the human genome and fine-tuned it to perfection." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Holt, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in a crisp suit. "Dr. Cortez, Ranger Chen, this is Elizabeth Cho, the President's National Security Advisor. She'd like an update on our guests." Cho wasted no time on pleasantries. "What have we learned? Are they truly from the future? And more importantly, can we trust them?" Amelia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. From a biological standpoint, the story checks out. They are human, but evolved. As for trust, that's not really my domain. "They've been cooperative since the escape attempt," Sarah added. "Especially their leader, the woman with green eyes. She calls herself Aurora." Cho's eyes narrowed. "Aurora? No last name." Sarah shook her head. "She says last names fell out of use in their time. Something about genetic privacy concerns." "Convenient," Cho muttered. "What else have they revealed about this future of theirs?" "Not much," Holt admitted. "They're cautious about sharing information, claiming that too much knowledge of the future could be dangerous." Cho snorted. "More convenient excuses. I don't like it. The president is under immense pressure to disclose this situation to the public and our allies. We need answers, and we need them now." As if on cue, a commotion arose from within the quarantine zone. Aurora was gesturing emphatically to the guards, pointing at the observation window. "She wants to speak with us," Sarah realized. Cho hesitated for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Fine, let's hear what she has to say." Minutes later, they were seated across from Aurora in a sterile interview room. Up close, her otherworldly qualities were more apparent, a certain fluidity to her movements, an intensity in her gaze that was almost unnerving. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Aurora began, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "I understand your frustration with our reticence, but you must understand the delicacy of our situation." "Then help us understand," Cho pressed. "Why are you here? What could be so dire that you'd risk changing the entire course of history?" Aurora took a deep breath. In our time, humanity stands on the brink of extinction. We've come back to prevent that future from ever occurring." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, remembering her earlier conversation with Agent Holt. Whatever they had imagined, the reality was far worse. Extinction. Amelia finally managed. How? War? Disease? Environmental collapse? Aurora shook her head. None of those, at least not directly. The threat we face, it's not of this world. Cho leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You're saying Earth is attacked by aliens?" "Yes and no," Aurora replied cryptically. "The beings we face, we call them the shadows. They're not corporeal in the way you'd understand. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on conscious thought, on the very essence of sentient life." Sarah struggled to wrap her mind around the concept. If they're not corporeal, how do you fight them? With great difficulty, Aurora said grimly. By the time we understood the true nature of the threat, it was almost too late. We've managed to hold them off, but our numbers dwindle every day. That's why we came back, to prepare humanity for the coming storm. Cho's expression was skeptical. "And we're just supposed to take your word for all this? You must understand how fantastical it sounds." Aurora nodded. "I do. That's why we brought proof." She turned to Agent Holt. "In our ship, there's a secure data core. It contains historical records, scientific data, everything you need to verify our claims and begin preparing your defenses." Holt exchanged glances with Cho, who gave a curt nod. "I'll have our team retrieve it immediately." As Holt left to make arrangements, Amelia leaned forward, her scientific curiosity piqued. These shadows, how do they manifest? How do they attack? Aurora's expression grew distant, haunted. They seep into our reality through cracks in the dimensional fabric. At first, it's subtle, strange dreams, inexplicable feelings of dread. Then come the disappearances, entire communities vanishing overnight. Finally, they manifest fully, living darkness that consumes everything in its path. Sarah shuddered at the imagery. "But you said you've held them off. How?" "We've developed technology to detect and temporarily repel them," Aurora explained. "But it's a losing battle. That's why we need your help. With centuries to prepare, to advance your technology and strengthen your defenses, humanity might stand a chance." Cho, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. "Let's say we believe you. What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership," Aurora said simply. "We share our knowledge, our technology. You use it to prepare, to unite the world against the coming threat. It won't be easy. The changes required will be massive, and not everyone will accept them readily. But it's our only hope." The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air. Sarah found herself studying Aurora's face, searching for any sign of deception. But all she saw was determination and a deep, abiding fear. "I'll need to consult with the president," Cho said at last. "In the meantime, I expect full cooperation from you and your team. No more escape attempts, no more holding back information. Are we clear?" Aurora nodded sullenly. "You have my word." As the meeting concluded, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging feeling that they were missing something crucial. The story was incredible, yes, but almost too neat. Why come back to this specific time? And why had only 6 of them made the journey? Her musings were interrupted by a commotion outside. Dr. Curie burst into the room, his face pale with excitement or fear. It was hard to tell which. "You need to see this," he gasped. "The ship, it's changing." They rushed to the hangar where the spacecraft was being held. The scene that greeted them was astonishing. The once sleek silver hull was now translucent, pulsing with an inner light that shifted through impossible colors. "It started a few minutes ago," Dr. Curie explained breathlessly. "It's as if the ship is awakening." As they watched, mesmerized, tendrils of light began to reach out from the craft, probing the air around it. One tendril brushed against a nearby tool cart, and in an instant the cart was gone, not destroyed, but simply erased from existence. "Everyone out," Holt shouted, ushering people towards the exit. "Initiate containment protocols now." In the chaos of the evacuation, Sarah found herself next to Aurora, who was staring at the transforming ship with a mix of awe and trepidation. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Sarah accused. Aurora met her gaze, her green eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "Not exactly like this, no. But we knew the ship would evolve. It's part of the process." "What process?" Sarah demanded. "What aren't you telling us?" Before Aurora could answer, a blinding flash of light erupted from the ship, accompanied by a sound that seemed to exist more in Sarah's mind than in her ears. When her vision cleared, she gasped in shock. The hangar was gone. In its place was a vast, shimmering dome of energy that encompassed the ship and a good portion of the surrounding area. And at the edges of the dome, barely visible, were writhing shapes of absolute darkness. "They're here," Aurora whispered, her voice filled with dread. "The shadows have followed us through time." As alarms blared and armed forces scrambled to respond to this new threat, Sarah realized that everything had changed. The future Aurora and her companions had fled was no longer a distant possibility. It had arrived here and now. The true test of humanity was about to begin, and Sarah Chen, once a simple park ranger, now found herself at the very heart of a war for survival that spanned not just space, but time itself. Secrets unveiled. The energy dome pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the assembled officials, scientists, and military personnel. The writhing darkness at its edges seemed to defy the laws of physics. Simultaneously there and not there, a visual paradox that hurt the eyes to look at directly. General Lancaster barked orders into her comm unit, coordinating a perimeter around the anomaly. "I want eyes on this thing 24/7. No one gets in or out without my express permission." Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the hastily established command center, her mind reeling from the rapid turn of events. Just days ago, her biggest concern had been protecting the desert's delicate ecosystem. Now she was witnessing what could be the opening salvo in an interdimensional war. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way," Dr. Amelia Cortez murmured beside her, her scientific curiosity warring with her survival instincts. Sarah nodded grimly. "Beautiful like a supernova, maybe. Awe-inspiring, but deadly." Their contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Aurora and her team, escorted by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The time travelers' faces were etched with a mixture of determination and barely concealed fear. "You need to let us approach the ship," Aurora insisted, addressing General Lancaster. "We can stabilize the temporal field and contain the shadow incursion." Lancaster's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "And why should we trust you? For all we know, you led these things here deliberately. Because if you don't, everyone within a 100-mile radius will cease to exist within the hour," one of Aurora's companions, a stern-faced man named Orion, stated matter-of-factly. A tense silence fell over the group. It was Agent Holt who finally broke it. "I say we let them try. We're out of our depth here, and they're the only ones who seem to know what's going on." Lancaster looked like she wanted to argue, but a glance at the writhing darkness beyond the energy dome changed her mind. "Fine, but you'll be accompanied by our team every step of the way." As preparations were made for Aurora's team to approach the ship, Sarah found herself drawn into a hushed conversation between Dr. Cortez and Dr. Curie. "The readings we're getting from that dome are off the charts," Curie was saying, his eyes gleaming with excitement despite the dire situation. "It's as if it's folding space-time around itself." Cortez nodded. "And the biological scans of our visitors are showing increasing anomalies. It's as if their very cellular structure is in flux." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, a sense of unease growing in her gut. Cortez turned to her, her expression grave. I'm saying that I don't think our visitors are just from the future. I think there's something more. Before Sarah could press for details, Aurora's team began their approach to the ship. They moved with practiced precision, each member taking up a position around the perimeter of the energy dome. From their hands, tendrils of light, not unlike those emitted by the ship, began to weave intricate patterns in the air. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the dome flickered and contracted. The writhing shadows at its edges recoiled, seeming to howl in silent fury as they were forced back. "It's working," Holt exclaimed, hope evident in his voice. But Sarah wasn't so sure. Something about the scene before her felt wrong, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. She watched as Aurora approached the now stabilized ship, placing her hand on its hull. In that moment, several things happened at once. The ship's surface rippled like water, and Aurora began to sink into it as if it were quicksand. The other time travelers, their task complete, suddenly collapsed to the ground, their bodies convulsing. And the data core they had retrieved from the ship earlier lit up like a Christmas tree, projecting a holographic display that filled the air above the command center. "Stop her," Lancaster shouted, but it was too late. Aurora had completely merged with the ship, disappearing from view. As chaos erupted around them, Sarah found herself transfixed by the holographic display. It showed a timeline, but not one she recognized from any history book. It depicted a future where humanity had indeed evolved, but not in response to an external threat. Instead, it showed a deliberate, calculated transformation, the methodical redesign of the human species. "My God," Cortez breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the information. They didn't come back in time to warn us. They came back to ensure their own creation. The pieces began to fall into place in Sarah's mind. The shadows weren't invaders from another dimension. They were a representation of humanity's past, the parts of our nature that these future humans had deemed unnecessary or dangerous. As if confirming her thoughts, the convulsing time travelers began to change before their eyes. Their forms shifted, becoming more fluid, less constrained by the laws of physics as they understood them. They were no longer pretending to be simply advanced humans. They were revealing their true nature. Orion, his body now a swirling mass of light and shadow, addressed the stunned onlookers. His voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are humanity's future," he intoned. "Not as you are, bound by flesh and limited perception, but as we should be, beings of pure consciousness, unfettered by physical form." "But the shadows," Holt protested, his hand hovering over his sidearm as if unsure whether it would even be effective. "The extinction-level threat are a necessary part of the process," Orion explained, his form rippling with what might have been amusement. "To evolve, humanity must face its darkest aspects, confront the shadow of its own nature. Only by overcoming these shadows can we, ascend." The implications were staggering. These beings hadn't come to prevent an apocalypse. They had come to initiate one. A controlled burn of humanity's baser nature, designed to forge a new species from the ashes of the old. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just first contact with an alien species. It was first contact with humanity's own potential future, a future that seemed determined to ensure its own existence no matter the cost. "And Aurora?" Sarah found herself asking, her voice sounding small and far away to her own ears. "The ship." Orion's form shimmered, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a smile in the swirling patterns of light. "Aurora is the key. The ship is the catalyst. Together, they will initiate the great transformation." As if on cue, the ship began to pulse with increasing intensity. Waves of energy rolled off it, washing over everything in their path. Where they touched, reality itself seemed to waver and distort. "It's starting," Orion announced, a note of triumph in his multifaceted voice. "The awakening of humanity's true potential." Panic erupted among the assembled humans. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the eldritch energies permeating the air. Others turned to run, only to find their path blocked by a shimmering barrier that had sprung up around the entire site. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah felt a strange calm descend over her. The part of her that was still the practical park ranger knew she should be terrified, should be fighting against this forced evolution with every fiber of her being. But another part, a part she hadn't known existed until this moment, felt a pull towards the transformative energy. She took a step towards the ship, then another. She could hear Holt and Lancaster shouting at her to stop, could feel Cortez trying to grab her arm, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. As she approached the shimmering surface of the vessel, Sarah saw her reflection, but not as she was. The Sarah in the reflection was something more, a being of light and possibility. She reached out, her fingers mere inches from the ship's surface. "Sarah, don't." It was Aurora's voice, but not coming from the ship as she expected. Sarah turned to see Aurora, the real Aurora, human and vulnerable, stumbling out of the shadows at the edge of the site. She looked battered and drained, as if she had been through a tremendous ordeal. "It's not what you think," Aurora gasped, her green eyes wide with desperation. "They lied to you, to all of us. This isn't evolution, it's extinction. If you touch that ship, if you accept the transformation, you'll lose everything that makes you human." Sarah hesitated, her hands still outstretched towards the ship. "But the future you showed us, the threat of the shadows." Aurora shook her head vehemently. "A fabrication. A lure to make you, accept the unacceptable. The beings you see now, they're not our future selves. They're something else entirely, something that wants to remake humanity in its own image." The air crackled with tension as Sarah stood frozen between two possible futures, one of transcendent evolution, the other of continued humanity with all its flaws and potential. In that moment, she understood that her choice would shape not just her own destiny, but that of the entire human race. As the energy from the ship surged around her, as Orion and his transformed companions urged her to embrace the change, as Aurora pleaded with her to resist, Sarah Chen found herself facing the most important decision in human history. And with the weight of that choice heavy on her shoulders, she prepared to act, knowing that whatever she decided, the world would never be the same again. Rising tensions. Sarah Chen stood at the precipice of choice, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The transformed beings, led by Orion, beckoned her towards a future of transcendence. Aurora, battered but resolute, pleaded for the preservation of humanity's essence. In that moment of crisis, Sarah made her decision. She stepped back from the ship. "No," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We don't need to erase our humanity to evolve. Our flaws, our struggles, they're what make us who we are." Orion's form flickered with what might have been anger. "You condemn your species to limitation, to suffering." "Maybe," Sarah countered, "but it's our choice to make, not yours." As if awakened by her words, the humans around her began to shake off their stupor. Agent Holt stepped forward, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder in silent support. Dr. Cortez and Dr. Curie exchanged determined glances, their scientific minds already racing with possibilities. Aurora smiled weakly, relief evident in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. But their reprieve was short-lived. The ship pulsed with renewed energy, and Orion's form grew more substantial, more threatening. "You think your choice matters," he thundered. "The great transformation cannot be stopped. It is inevitable." The air crackled with tension as humanity faced its would-be future. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the course of evolution itself. The ultimatum. In the days that followed, the world teetered on the brink of chaos. News of the crash and the existential threat it posed had leaked, sparking panic and civil unrest across the globe. Governments struggled to maintain order while frantically searching for a way to counter the looming transformation. Sarah, now thrust into the role of humanity's unlikely champion, worked tirelessly with Aurora, Agent Holt, and a team of the world's brightest minds. They pored over the data from the ship, searching for weaknesses in Orion's plan. "The ship is the key," Aurora explained, her strength slowly returning. "It's not just a vessel, it's a terraforming device. If we can't stop it, it will rewrite the very fabric of reality on Earth." Dr. Kilry nodded grimly. "And in doing so, it'll remake every living thing in its image. Evolution by force." As they worked, reports came in from around the world of strange phenomena, people spontaneously developing impossible abilities, patches of reality warping and twisting. The transformation had already begun. Orion's voice echoed across every communication channel, an ultimatum to the people of Earth. Embrace the change willingly and ascend to greatness. Resist and be remade regardless, but at a cost of unimaginable suffering. Humanity's response was divided. Some, seduced by the promise of power and transcendence, flocked to the crash site, offering themselves up for transformation. Others fought against the encroaching change with everything they had. Sarah watched it all with a heavy heart, knowing that time was running out. But as she observed Aurora tirelessly working to save a humanity that wasn't even her own, an idea began to form. "Aurora," Sarah said slowly, "you're proof that humanity can evolve without losing its essence. You're advanced, but you're still human where it counts." Aurora looked up, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "You're right. I am the product of natural evolution, not this forced transformation. But how does that help us now?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "Because you're the blueprint we need. If we can't stop the transformation entirely, maybe we can guide it. Make it ours instead of theirs." With renewed purpose, the team set to work on a daring plan. If they could use Aurora's genetic structure as a template and interface it with the ship's terraforming protocols, they might be able to hijack the transformation process. But as they neared completion of their desperate gambit, Orion made his move. The ship's energy output surged to unprecedented levels, and across the world, people began to change en masse. The final battle for humanity's future had begun. Humanity united. The sky burned with unnatural fire as the ship's energy engulfed the Earth. All around the world, people fought against the encroaching transformation with every fiber of their being. At the crash site, Sarah and her team raced against time to implement their plan. Aurora stood at the center of a hastily constructed array of equipment, her body connected to the ship's systems by a web of glowing tendrils. "It's now or never," Dr. Cortez shouted over the roar of reality being rewritten. "Aurora, are you ready?" Aurora nodded, her face a mask of determination. "Do it." Dr. Corey threw the switch, and Aurora's consciousness surged into the ship's systems. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like the universe itself screaming, the energy wave faltered. Orion's form manifested before them, his voice thunderous with rage. "What have you done?" Sarah stepped forward, staring defiantly into the swirling vortex of his non-human eyes. "We've taken control of our own destiny. Humanity will evolve, yes, but on our terms, not yours." All around the world, the forced transformation began to shift. Instead of erasing humanity, it enhanced it. People found themselves stronger, faster, more resilient, but still fundamentally human. The shadow creatures born of humanity's darker nature didn't disappear, but became integrated, balanced. Orion howled in fury and despair as his form began to dissipate. "You've doomed yourselves to half measures and compromise." "No," Sarah countered, watching as the last vestiges of the would-be future faded away. "We've given ourselves a chance to grow, to become better, without sacrificing who we are." As the energy wave subsided, Aurora collapsed, caught by Agent Holt before she could hit the ground. She smiled weakly up at Sarah. "It worked. I can feel it. The future's changed." In the aftermath, humanity faced a new world of challenges and possibilities. The transformation had unlocked potential in every person, but it would take time to understand and master these new abilities. Sarah found herself at the forefront of this new era, working alongside Aurora to guide humanity through its next steps. The ship, now inert, became a repository of knowledge, a blueprint for responsible advancement. As she stood watching the sunrise on the first day of this new age, Sarah reflected on the choice she had made. Humanity hadn't ascended to godhood, hadn't erased its flaws and limitations. Instead, it had been given tools, incredible, powerful tools, but the choice of how to use them remained in human hands. It wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles, setbacks, and those who would abuse their newfound abilities. But as Sarah looked out at a world brimming with potential, she felt hope. Humanity had faced its ultimate test and emerged not as conquerors or gods, but as something perhaps more precious. Human beings, flawed but ever striving, ready to write the next chapter of their story among the stars. The end.